It's your man Alex, and in this video, I'm going to be showing you guys my take on a super textured Quiff self haircut. So let's get right into it. So to get started with the self haircut, I'm going to be putting in the bald line using my trimmers. Now these are pretty expensive tools. You don't necessarily need to use really expensive trimmers like these. These are probably like $200. You can definitely get away with using $20, $30 trimmers as well. Just make sure that they have the T blade on them, which is basically the blade, the cutting blade is shaped like the capital letter T. This is going to help, of course, cut more hair at the same time. So what I'm doing is putting in the first guideline, and it's very different from my ordinary first guideline. I'm creating this weird like rainbow-esque shape going around my ear, and I'm cutting going upward with the blade. So it's kind of like an up and down hair guideline. I don't even know how to explain it, but it's actually quite difficult, and I don't necessarily think it's worth it. I was just trying to like test something out just to see what would happen. It wasn't too difficult to do, a little bit more difficult than just putting in a straight line. But, you know, for the first guideline, just to change it up and do something a little different, I thought it'd be cool to try it out for this self haircut. Now for the second guideline, I'm going in using my clippers with the no guard lever open, and I'm going to be going up about 3/4 of an inch to 1 whole inch all the way around my head, following that same weird rainbow looking shape all the way around for that first guideline. So it's kind of difficult to do this one, not overtly difficult, but a little bit difficult, especially toward the temple where I'm going straight up. As I get toward the ear and the back of my head, it becomes like normal, like pretty easy. But for this part, you're really just making sure that the guideline is even throughout the entire head. The last thing you want, of course, is to have an uneven self haircut. You know, cutting your own hair can be difficult by itself, so don't make it more difficult for yourself by not having even guidelines. So then when you're at the fading stage of the self haircut, you just made it really difficult for you to blend out those hard lines and create a nice gradient fade. So now going in for the next guideline, I'm going to be using the number 1 guard lever open, still going up 3/4 to 1 whole inch all the way around my head. Now you might be wondering, Alex, why do you go up 3/4 to 1 inch? Is there a particular reason why? And the answer is yes. So the reason why I make the guidelines relatively big is because you need that extra space when you're going in to create the guideline to fade in afterwards. So when you're fading, you don't want to have such a tiny space to work with. You need more room to work with when you're removing the hard lines. So that's why the guidelines are relatively big, because we need that space to fade in afterwards when we're using the lever halfway, the lever closed, and then we're doing some detail work. We need that extra space to really expand out the fade and create that really big difference from light to dark. And so now I'm going in for the final guideline using the number 2 guard lever open, still going up about 3/4 to 1 inch, only this time I'm going up at like a 90-degree angle straight up and off my head, because I like to keep more of like a squared shape on my head. I don't like to have a round head. I like to be a little bit more squared off. That's why I go straight up at a 90-degree angle on the sides of my head, so that I create more of that squared shape and freehand that squared shape. And I'm just cutting straight up, and whatever hairs fall into the blade are what get cut, and then it leaves all that hair by my part line and allows the shape that I want. So now for everyone's favorite part of every self haircut is the fading step. So for me, I like to do a 3-step fading step for the first hard line. So remember that bald line that we put at the very beginning of the haircut using the trimmers? It's a 3-step process that I like to use to get rid of that hard line. So the first step is using the no guard lever halfway. When I'm using the lever halfway, this only really gets rid of about 50% of that hard line. And the reason why I do this is because it softens up the line and it creates a nice angled gradients going up the fade. So it removes about 50% of the hard line, but it also creates a little bit of that gradients that I'm looking for. And then I'm going to go in afterwards and use the no guard lever closed. So when I use the no guard lever close, which you'll see in just a second, that's where it's going to cut about 90 to 95% of that hard line. And then we can go forward and use the trimmers afterwards. So it can feel like it's a lot of work and it's a lot of effort, but believe me, it's totally worth it. And these are definitely necessary steps to get rid of that bottom hard line, which in my opinion, and from what I see in the comment section all the time, it's probably the most challenging hard line to get rid of. So I think if you have some type of structure, some type of system in hand, like I have this 3-step process, it definitely makes the self haircutting experience a little bit more enjoyable, knowing that you have peace of mind having a system in place. So that's why I always have, like, I say a lot of the same things over and over, but it's to really ingrain in your head the simplicity of the system. And once you can grasp the system, it just becomes really easy to cut your own hair. And then it's always a breeze whenever you need a new haircut. You know, you don't need to go to the barber shop and boom, all right, I can cut my hair real quick, 30 minutes, boom, bing, bang, boom, done. So now you're just seeing the final step with the trimmers, and then that should get rid of all of the hard line. And so now to remove the next hard line, I'm going in with the half guard lever closed. Now I do want to mention that my clippers are 0 gapped, and I think that definitely helps when it comes to removing these hard lines using the half guards. So I'm using the half guard, and then you're going to see me use the 1.5 guard next. And I think having the clippers 0 gapped definitely does help a little bit. So if you want to take that step, it's really easy just to unscrew the back blade and then to reposition the blade. Of course, making sure that the back blade is slightly longer than the cutting blade. I have a video on that as well, which you guys can check out too. But fading in the second hard line is not too difficult. You might need to use the lever here and there to, you know, play around with the bulky areas, especially if you have dark hair like me. I find that fading can be a little bit difficult because, you know, the transition from light on the bottom to really dark on the top, it's a pretty hefty transition, right? So if you've got blonde hair or lighter colored hair, it's probably a lot easier for you. But for somebody like me, you know, you're gonna have to play around with the lever a little bit, do a little bit more detail work than most people would. So once you've finished fading in using your clipper, I always like to go back and use my thinning shears held in reverse method. This is a method that I discovered when I was cutting my own hair one day, and it's actually really helpful to get rid of a lot of the hard lines and bulky spots within the fade. So basically all I do is I grab my thinning shears and I flip them in reverse, and I point cut directly at any hard lines or bulky areas that I see within the fade. And you'll notice it does a really good job of blending out and making that fade a little bit more gradient. Now I'm going in with the thinning shear over comb technique just to blend in the fade to the slightly longer length on top by my part line. So I'm just blending everything in, making that transition from really short hair on the sides and back to that longer hair on the top a little bit easier and a little bit softer. Now I understand using the thinning shear over comb technique can be a little bit challenging, especially for your own self, but if you go in slowly, use the mirrors appropriately, guide the comb and the scissor at the same exact time, and cut at the same time, it should be a lot easier. Just take your time and be patient. So like I said earlier, this is a super textured quiff, not just a textured quiff, but it's super textured. So I'm going in and point cutting like crazy to cut off about 1/2 inch to even like 1 inch in some places, and just like ridiculously creating texture throughout my hair. Typically when you have like these peaks and valleys that you're seeing within my hair on top, that's what creates the texture and like really makes the haircut look super cool. So if you're going for like a really edgy, textured, like super textured look, putting in those peaks and valleys and doing what I'm doing right here is a really great method to create a textured look. Now it's really easy actually, and usually I wet my hair when I cut the length on top, but because I've been cutting my own hair for so long, I understand how my hair works, so cutting it while it was dry wasn't an issue. To style my hair, I'm using organic clay by Kouras, a high hold matte finish clay made with only 6 all natural ingredients. It not only styles perfectly, but also nourishes your scalp and promotes healthy hair. I couldn't be happier with it, and I'm excited for you to try it too. So now to really make the haircut look so fresh and so clean, crispy clean, we gotta give ourselves a nice lineup. So I'm going in with my scissors to trim the forehead. It's a little bit more safer than using my actual trimmers. And I'm just going in with the trimmers afterwards to cut the vertical bars, the C-cup around my eyes and my eyebrow. And this is really just adding the finishing touches to the self haircut and making it all come together. This is my take on a super textured Quiff self haircut. Let me know in the comments below how you think the haircut turned out and what other hairstyles you'd like me to try out next. But make sure you leave a like, subscribe to my channel, follow along with my hair clay journey, and check out this video if you want to take your self haircuts to the next level.